Hey, welcome to the Doug Thompson Podcast Live. That's a mouthful. I got to come up with something different for that. With me this week, I'm very excited to have my friend Deanna Russo. We had to postpone this because we're moving and life kicks in and these other things. So she's joining us today from Mount Russo. So if you're listening to
Look
huge
at
mountain,
Look at that mountain in my backyard.
owns an entire mountain that irritates her husband to no end. But anyway, how you doing, Deanna?
I'm good. I'm fabulous because it's Friday.
It's Friday. You're outside enjoying the nice weather.
Yes.
It's still like 9 million degrees down here in Texas. One of these days it'll cool off a little bit to 8 million degrees. That's why I live down here. I'm solar powered, and my joints like the heat to keep them well. I spent overnight in DC, which luckily it was still warm. But anyway, so thanks. Tell my audience about yourself. Who is Deanna Russo?
Who is Deanna Russo? The book that is Deanna Russo. So I own Leverage Up. It is a company where we work with our clients to help them on LinkedIn. And it's not just we're going to set up your profile and we're going to do everything for you, but we teach people how to do it themselves in a way that is not icky and that is not salesy. And I mean, I've got this really great triangle that I teach my clients. But outside of business, I have 3 kids, and I have a husband who I absolutely adore, and we moved to beautiful Akron, Ohio about 3 months ago. And so, yeah, everything's good.
Well, cool. My wife is from Ohio, so the other side of the state. She's over near the Salina area, more toward the end. So it's there's some good people there, and great sweet corn, and I love the tenderloins from there. But my mother's from Iowa, so I get a lot of that. So tell us about this. So I like that you teach people how to do their profile, because it's something that I see, and you're probably more of an expert at it than I am, that people just leave static. Some of them are still the old LinkedIn is the digital resume.
Yep.
Thing. So helping them know how to update it is important, but it changes a lot. So talk to us about your triangle. We want to get into some geometry today.
Yeah.
And hypotenuses and things like that.
Isosceles and equilateral. You cannot have one piece of the triangle without the other 2. So we start with your profile, but that's not where it ends. You can have a really good LinkedIn profile, but if you're not doing what you need to do on the engagement and the content side, then the profile, it's just going to sit there and you're not going to get anybody looking at it. So it is a matter of optimizing that profile and then engaging with the people that you want to be more visible to, the ideal clients, the prospects. You never know who's going to refer business to you. And then working into the content marketing strategy and giving yourself a voice, because people can see you posting comments on other people's posts, but what does that say about your voice and about what you can do? Doug, I can't hear you.
That's because I'm a good host and I had the button muted. So
I'm just hoping it wasn't on my side.
No, host fail. So we'll just talk that up to get that out of the way today. Maybe people cut me a little slack because it's birthday time. But that's a whole other post. So it sounds like the profile, again, we're all about storytelling here. And what is the profile, if you had to sort of, the storytelling arc, what part of that play would the profile piece be? Because you talked about all these other activities, which definitely come into it.
Yep.
But what part would that be?
I would say that you can tell a really good story in your about section. Mm-hmm. And actually, each piece of your profile can lend itself to your story. So this is your way of branding yourself. And it's your way of telling people who you are, where you came from, what your story is, and how you can help your clients. And it's your profile. That's it. And then when you start to engage, when you start to post content, then more people, as they see what you're doing, they're going to go to your profile and learn. And that's why it's so important. And that's why we work on it first.
So I noted, excuse me, there's a lot of different new things that LinkedIn's introduced. So first they allowed you to sort of speak your voice, or you had 10 seconds to say something. And then now they've got a video feed in your little moving thing. Tell me about how those sort of play into this as well.
The cover story video, when it was first released and when I saw that I first had it, it was about 48 hours or so that it took me to put mine up. And I knew that mine wasn't perfect. It was taken in the living room amidst moving. But what I did was I set up a group of stuffed animals, and because my kids were at school, and that was my attentive audience. I was talking to my audience, and they were talking back. So it worked out really good. And it's 30 seconds to say how you help your people, how you why you're there, what the reason for you being on LinkedIn is. So that's really the point. You get 30 seconds. So it took me 5 takes, and usually I'm a 1-take video type person, because I find that the more takes you do, the angrier you get and the more frustrated you get. So it's a 1-take video type thing for me, because otherwise people see, ooh.
Yeah, you're a little bit like me. The more I do it, the worse I get as I go. And I hadn't thought about anger or frustration coming into play of that one. But I do beat myself up pretty bad. You know, if you look at the outtakes, you moron, what are you doing? You know, so you can say this, so I have to sort of speak that. So does any of these things, if you have it enabled, if you have these other things, if somebody watches it, did this play into the algorithm as far as who gets to see it and how you do things? You may not know the answer to this, but it just sort of comes into my mind.
The cover story plays into the algorithm. Yeah. It can only help your visibility. It can only help people get to know you more. I have heard that people with creator mode have turned off creator mode because they have noticed that their visibility and their profile views go down. But I myself have turned it on, have turned it off, and turned it on again, and I'm not noticing a huge difference. So
creator mode, I haven't even looked at that yet. Man, I'm a Luddite when it comes to some things on this. I got to stay on top of this. Creator mode. Okay. So that's check. We'll go check into that. I would imagine if you're watching the video and stuff, then they land on your page and they stay there for longer, which I know does play into the algorithm. But how when you're talking about, so LinkedIn is one of the profiles that a lot of people have. I mean, some people have them on Instagram. They have different things on the social media. How do they all sort of tie together? Are they, and I'm sure you target towards the audience, but when you're telling how does a story differ between the different platforms? I know we're talking about LinkedIn primarily, but you're everywhere anyway. So
yeah, I mean, you cannot treat LinkedIn like other social media platforms because it's not. There is a different algorithm. The way to really capture people's attention is different. It's not Facebook. It's not Instagram. Instagram, you pile on the hashtags, for example, and on LinkedIn, you have to use those hashtags strategically. I still see people putting 10, 15, 20 hashtags on a post on LinkedIn, and I'm like, well, what's that doing for you? You go down and you see they got 2 likes. So what's it's just a waste of a post and waste of your energy if you can't use it strategically. So that's what I teach my clients is to do it specifically for LinkedIn, posting content and engaging specifically for LinkedIn as opposed to other social media platforms.
How often should you update your profile? How often does your story change? I guess, because when you look at books and things like that, they sort of static and not very sexy a lot of times, but they can be classics, and the classic profile on LinkedIn I don't think would last very long.
I think that it all depends on the individual. I have had clients who have signed up to work with me, and halfway through, they told me, okay, now I'm changing my focus. I'm like, well, that's good because LinkedIn is not set in stone. So you can just go in and change things up the way you want. And that's what too many people put a lot of pressure on themselves as far as it's got to look this way or it's got to look, and I don't know about these words, but you can change things. And that's what the difference is you can test and test and test and put in one headline on Monday and in 2 weeks change it up to a different headline because you didn't like the way that was looking. So that's the thing about it, is it doesn't have to be something where you put it up and then you don't change it for a year. If you want to, if you like the way it looks, that's fine. But too many people think that it's a concrete set in stone type thing, and it's not.
Isn't there a risk if you're changing it too often to sort of lose your audience or lose some followers?
There is, but if you're not happy with it, then how will other people be happy with it too? You need to be happy with the way that it looks. And honestly, that's the one thing that I get. Well, one of my questions is I just don't know what words to use. And it's about testing to see what words really do, and then what words will work for your audience.
You know, it's a little bit like my last guest, Carmel, that we had, and she talks about if you don't know what your story is, if you haven't defined, who you are, what your story is, all that, then you can't really find, you would call your tribe, which it sounds like you're saying a lot of the same thing. So you have to be happy with the way profile looks like you're presented. Is it telling these things to be effective?
Yep. And too many people are still treating it like an online resume. They're still using their job title in the headline. They're still copying and pasting their summary at the top of their resume into their about section instead of telling their story and their why.
I find a lot of people in technology, especially, unfortunately, their job title or what they do is their identity to them. I am an email administrator. I do this, but they're much more than that. And I think they miss opportunities to transform as technology goes, because pretty soon nobody needs to be an email administrator anymore because it's offloaded to everybody else. It's like an icebox repairman or something like that. You obsolete yourself by being so focused. You may be the best one on the planet, but if that product's no longer viable or nobody's using it, then you've sort of worked yourself into a corner.
That's right. And you can be, for example, an account executive, but if you just write the words account executive, you bunch yourself into 6.74 million people who are using account executive in their title. But if you say, I know how to sell X, Y, and Z, or selling made easy, or something that easily rolls off the tongue, then chances are when you search, you're not going to find 6.74 million people using it. So it is about being that unicorn. It is about being the pink or purple or green or blue figurine among all of the gray and the black, because it's about standing out. That's really what it boils down to. Is you are not going to stand out on LinkedIn among 774 million people unless you're differentiating yourself.
Obviously, I think you read some Seth Godin when I noticed you started about purple and all these other things that go along. Seth Godin's got talks about the purple. What is it? Purple something or other. Anyway, the purple sticks in my mind. But isn't there a risk? Because I did this once. I did in my headline, I had Slayer of Sales Nerdery, which was catchy.
It is,
but I think I was the only person on the planet that would ever search for that.
But you have sales in there.
Yeah.
So if someone is looking for someone to help them with sales, you've got a keyword in there.
Yeah. But again, I'm part of the 7 point whatever million sales people there. So you have to be, I guess you have to use this judiciously. Don't get too, unicornish about it, to make it where it's relatable to normal people.
And you get 220 characters to use in that headline, which doesn't mean you have to use them all, but you can switch it up and put one thing in there and then put multiple things in there. So it doesn't have to be 3 words, and it doesn't have to be 12 words. It has to be what works for you. And you have to be happy with it.
Yeah, so I guess to sort of wrap this thing up, the LinkedIn profile is sort of like the Cliff Notes version of what your story is. It's very succinct. You can read it in a very short time to get a better, an 80% picture. Hey, is this something I want to read further? Do I want to go in and do that? Or they have Blinkist, or they have whatever now, which sort of condense these things into, here's just the bare facts that go along with it, and with a little flavor of who that person is. Would that be a safe?
I think so. I think it's your online billboard. It is your online persona. It is who you want people to know. And then again, it has to go back to, why are you there? What is your purpose of being on the platform? If relationships and networking and meeting people is what you're all about, you can say it. You can say it in your headline. You can say it in your about. I connected with someone yesterday who said, I love meeting people. Okay. That was interesting to me.
Well, I had a couple of people connect to me because I used the storytelling is greater than text-plaining. Again, because my audience is, we've discussed this before, are technically minded people. They get too much down to the ones and zeros because it's cool. And it's, you've heard, if you watch Big Bang, it's a bunch of Sheldons talking to each other is what it is. And it's a shame, because there's a bunch of other people out in the real world that could benefit from what they have and what they can do. So I try to work with them to talk differently, to tell a story, to leverage that skill, of which I sort of fell into it. I didn't set out to, in my career as a sales nerd, that's the way I like to introduce myself. Maybe I need to change my headline to sales nerd. But it's been about relating, because when I talk to people that have the budgets that can buy things, typically they consume technology, but could care less about, how it works in the back end. They just want it to work. They want to fade in the back end. So how do I, as a technical person, sell this? Or even, I was talking to somebody else last night that if I am I've got this product and I want to talk to venture capitalists, how do I explain to them what the value is, where the market is? Because they generally don't care, again, sort of what's the back end, unless you're Mark Cuban, who is a bit of a nerd himself.
Mm-hmm.
So
it is about... So I've worked with an engineer. Let me use him as an example. And what he did with his about section was he told a story about working with his dad on cars. He's always wanted to know how things work. And so when he relates that experience, then you get to know him, and you get to know his why. So regardless of how tech savvy you are, if people don't know your why and don't know why you do what you do, then all it is just tech savvy words. And that's something else. You've got to dumb it down for people when you're talking plain speak. If you're using all of these acronyms that people don't know, then you're going to lose them. You're going to get... And that's where it goes, where the headline is about. You can start it in your headline and start to tell your why and what you're all about. And then in your about, you really expand it.
Yeah, I call it, instead of dumbing it down, because I find some people get offended by that. But I mean, I call it making it less expensive. I make it less expensive, so I use less $10 and $20 words and use more of the $1 and $2 words that most people would use and understand. Just a different way to phrase it. So you say you're a survivor, and I was reading in your profile and your bio and stuff, a cancer survivor. Your sister was died in a car accident stuff. Tell us a little bit about that, but more importantly, how has that impacted the way that you go through in the story and the stuff that you do today?
I am stronger because of what has happened to me. I wrote up a post, and I recently wrote up a post where I was extremely vulnerable, and I basically opened up a lot about my past. And the song from Kelly Clarkson, "What Doesn't Kill You Makes You Stronger," kept playing over and over and over again. Because if I would not have gone through what I went through, then I wouldn't be where I am today. So I think that it's all a big puzzle, and all the pieces fit in. And unfortunately, not the pieces, things happen, but I wouldn't be who I am if I didn't have all of those experiences that happened to me back in the day. When she was killed, it was one of the, without fail, one of the hardest things I have ever gone through. But there are times, even all these years later, where I miss that relationship because I was robbed by someone of a person that I only got to know for 18 years. And we had really great times in those 18 years, but the adult relationship is not existent now. I'm not able to have that adult relationship. My kids don't have an aunt to look up to. They don't have cousins. So you wonder what would have happened. And in regards to the cancer, I mean, like, that was such a freak of nature thing that happened to me. I was in a car accident, and I was having back pains, and that's when they did the MRI. They said, "Well, your back looks good, but there's something going on with your lung," and I wasn't having any breathing problems, nothing like that. And then it was removed surgically. So I still have people saying, "Thank God for that car accident." And it was a very weird and surreal thing. But all these years later, thank God, I'm still doing good. So.
Yeah, I can relate to both of those things a little bit, in that my father died when I was in high school. I was a senior in high school. He had cancer, so I had, the experience from the patient side of that. And I do remember the 17 years or so I got to spend with, well, as much as I can remember. I can't remember much when I'm 1 or 2, but I remember, my dad and I worked on cars. We did electronic stuff, and which got my interest in stuff in that, installing radios and stuff. And so I did get some of my how things work, taking things apart, putting them back with some extra parts a lot of times, but putting them together. But I can relate to that. And you do, now with kids and grandkids, and they never got to meet my dad, my kids and my wife even. And it's like, you would have liked him. He was, and I sort of tell stories around that, and it made me, I think, grow up faster for sure, because then it was just my mother and I, or mother and me. That's one of those grammar things I never figure out. But it was, I had to grow up, accept it, and I, at that point in time, I understand that we all die. We all do these things, and it's how, to borrow a little Dakota Myers, it's how we sort of live. You have a birthday, we have a day we die, and it's how we live the stuff that's in the dash in between that we can control. So it did give me that perspective, and it sounds like you do too. I mean, I'm sure, I don't know if you do. I talk to my dad on occasion as I'm talking through things, and to do that. And then the cancer thing, or you could look at now, it covered, my wife tells me, because she had blood cancer, and she's been in remission for like 50. She's like an outlier of what happens. But when you've been near death, I mean, when you face that thing, that changes your perspective on what you can do, what the strength that it gives you, as you're talking about the Kelly Clarkson, I think, which is a very appropriate song. Mm-hmm. Oh, and it does prepare you for, I firmly believe things happen for a reason. If you're religious and stuff, well, why does God let bad things happen? We did a thing on Job in the Sunday school class the other day, and poor Job, you use him as an example of, man, this guy suffered a lot, mm-hmm. But is it all in preparation for whatever your next role is in there, because if you don't, it's like when I did Ironman triathlons and stuff. If you don't do that training, if you don't embrace the suck and go through those tough days, that you would never be prepared to be able to finish that endeavor. And it sounds like you're saying much the same thing.
It's true. If you put everything in perspective, for example, if I get a no from a client, you put it in perspective that it's just a no, and that there's going to be a yes. There may not be a yes tomorrow. There may be a yes next week, but it's about keeping it all in perspective. And I have to sometimes remind my husband, when we get so bogged down with 3 kids, there's a lot of stuff going on. But I sometimes have to remind him, look, everybody's healthy. You know, that's one thing we got to remember. When I went through all that cancer stuff and I was in the hospital and I was in, like, it was something where it happened 15 years ago, but I still remember going through all of that. So it really helps put everything in perspective, that when there's stress, I mean, you just have to look at the big picture. So that's why I think that it really helps even to this day, whether it's in business or whether it's in.
Yeah, there's a saying I remind myself of on occasion: when you're going through hell, just keep going.
Yep. Yep.
So, but that's wonderful, and that's a great backstory into what makes you who you are, and sort of when you're talking to your clients, I'm sure you bring some of that perspective as well. This profile just isn't working. It's doing these other things, or it's not having the desired effect. And you say, look, let's get some perspective. What have we done? What have you, that you're that calming influence to help right the ship, to get this back on track to go what goes on.
Sometimes it just takes a fresh set of eyes too. And I actually I was working with a company, and the sales people, when we were going through each and every one of their profiles, one thing I would repeat is you can write a really good about section that you're happy with today, but don't put it in there yet. Go back in 2 days, go back in 3 days, and look at again from a fresh perspective. And you may say, well, I want to, or I'm not happy. Because when you put it up there, you'll be more satisfied with what you have, and you won't just be rushing just to put something in for the sake of putting it in. So I think that a fresh set of eyes and someone who knows how the platform works and has made it work for herself and can then sit with you and take you step by step. And whether it's your profile or whether it's finding those people that you know are there, you want to start conversations with, that's why you can't have your profile. You got to have those other two. And the storytelling part of it, Doug, I feel like I have been able to really go back to my communications background and the writing part of it. And that's where, when I write a good post, I feel like I'm not just writing it for me, but I'm writing it for other people too. And I feel like it's not only, it's got to have value. It's got to just, I mean, you can't just tell a story and not have it end. There's got to be some sort of lesson there. And the lesson that you learn, our other people will be able to relate with it too.
Yeah, it's what's the call to action is the favorite type thing, or what do you want them to do with it? So that's sort of the endpoint that goes on. And you're right about sort of, so I did a speaking engagement at a reception. We sponsored a reception the other night. I mean, it was like 15 minutes, and I wrote it and I was like still tweaking it up into the last minute. But the funny thing, and this is just me, is I tweaked it, changed this word, changed verbiage, changed the order, changed the other things. I should go through it till I'm happy, because it is very perspective. I was happy with where I left it off 2 days ago until I read it the next day, and I said, no, I can do that better. And so you're very right about that. And then I get to when I'm speaking, and this was the challenge I had in the TED Talk, in that I am very much getting a vibe from the room and building some of this stuff at the last moment based off the people I've talked to right before I get on stage. And as I'm doing this and I look, I still followed the basic structure, but the words that came out were very much rearranged and different than what happened, because I was able to sort of make that connection and tie into it, and it reminded things of me. And again, so that's an example. If I had it, I was very happy with it, but then I got in the room, met a few people, learned about it, then I had to go rewrite it on the fly. So that's,
Yep.
if you're out there, take an improv class, because that teaches you a lot about how to sort of respond to the moment.
Absolutely. And I will say, when you were telling that story, I immediately thought of people when they're working with other people, whether it's coworkers or whether it's clients or colleagues, whoever the people are. If you're having an interaction with another person and you feel like there's a lesson there, that's content. That's what people, because if you see a lesson, other people are going to see a lesson too. So take those experiences, because that's the question I get asked the most is, what do I post? And I can tell you what not to post. Don't post press releases. Don't post the sales line. Don't post quotes, but post things that people can relate to, and a story that you can relate to. And that's what it boils down to, is when I show a story and when I post something where I'm either helping people or I'm learning myself, then I know that it's a good one.
Well, I think you summed up the conversation very well there. So how do people get in touch with you?
LinkedIn. Direct message me on LinkedIn and find out more. Follow me. Follow some of the things that I'm doing. I have an email newsletter that I'm launching. So feel free to sign up right through LinkedIn or go to my website, leverageupllc.com, and I'm happy to have a conversation.
Cool. And I'll put all that stuff in the show notes. With Deanna, go climb Mount Russo there while the weather's out. As usual, I run long because I find the conversations and the story very interesting. So thank you for spending some of your Friday morning with me. And thanks for being a guest here. And until next time, that's the Doug Thompson Podcast. Have a great weekend. Bye.
Thank you.